Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, The Moth That Eats Words. The Exeter book is an Anglo-Saxon collection of riddle poems. Riddle 47, which is the one I'd like to focus on for this episode, is one of the more famous. Thanks to Saga Thing for reading it recently and Steve Saunders on Facebook for reminding me I hadn't written this up yet. They are discussing a lacuna in the middle of their saga, and so for theme, they wanted to discuss smaller lacunas. Here is the riddle. A moth ate words. I thought that was a marvellous fate, that the worm, a thief in the dark, should eat a man's words. A brilliant statement, its foundation strong. Not a whit the wiser was he for having fattened himself on those words. That is from the Crap and Dobby translation, which came out in 1936. The authors can't help their names. Let's move on. In the 4th edition of Ars Magica, in the Mysteries, there was a ritual that allowed Magi to study by eating books. It was called Consumption of the Logos, and it's on page 95 and 96. With sufficient viz, this ritual, a high muto-mentum score, and a total lack of devotion to personal safety, a character can engineer a swift experience mill in this version of the game. At its simplest, the mages could transform themselves into a giant bookworm so that the process of eating books is less onerous. Given that the smell of old paper is caused by the release of vanillin, I'd imagine they're delicious. In the newer edition, the vegetarianism of cream and magi might get in the way of eating books that are made out of parchment. But enough of that. Moving on. Taking this a step further, a magus can arrange so that their familiar does the actual eating. Let's imagine a Creaman magus who finds a bookworm, enlarges it, and then binds it. For statistics, I'd suggest the dragons in the Socatra chapter of Realms of Hermes. Their statistics are based on an indigenous variety of worm lizard. They're legless, but they clearly don't look like snakes. There is a problem here. In earlier editions of the game, familiars had an intelligence score equal to the magus's -1, and whatever the magus or familiar learned, their partner also learned, and this meant that if you read a book on Hermetic jurisprudence, your cat could debate it with you. It also, theoretically, meant that Yabbit and Magi were really good at climbing along the ridges of fences. That doesn't happen in the current game. In the current game, familiars' default intelligence is at -3, and although they can learn experience along with their magus, they need to actually put some effort in. The way to work around this is to make sure that the magus's mind is in the bookworm's body when the eating occurs. Can you use the shared senses modification from the Silver Cord, for example? Does this break the ritual because the ritual's target is an individual mind rather than a group? You might need to rework the ritual, but if you already know it, you get a similarity bonus. Some magi are able to swap bodies with their familiars, and that's as good as a transformation for this purpose. If you have a true bookworm, this also leads to questions based on the bookworm's life cycle. What happens when the bookworm makes a cocoon out of a book, and what does it learn when it is reduced to goo and reborn? Does the book matter? If you use the Travels of Fidoso, do you get a different effect than if you use the Art of Magic? Can a magus following the path of the body skip the initiation where they lie in a glass coffin for a season if they know already from participating in their moth's transformation what it's like to be reduced to soup and then reborn? I did tell you it was a short one this week. Your saga may vary.